Greetings everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be talking about how to start a Custodes army. I know this video isn't relevant to a lot of my viewers as they already have a Custodes army. However, I think it's great to welcome new players or just people that want to start collecting Adeptus Custodes who might not be super competitive and just want to take a look at how you should get started with the army. There will be a bit of talk about how you can build a potential competitive army, or at least how you should build your units. But in general, this video is simply for those that are either casual players or completely new to Warhammer and want to start with the Adeptus Custodes. So let's just get right into it. Why should you collect Adeptus Custodes? Well, first of all, they're cool. But second of all, they are a very good army to start with because they are very cheap to collect. A full 2000 point army of Custodes is probably the second cheapest army you can get outside of maybe Imperial Knights. But unlike Imperial Knights, you won't have like 10 models, you'll have like 20 to 30 models. And in general, that's, I think, a good sized army to have and to, learn the game with. There's also the good news that because Custodes are so super elite, any box you buy of Custodes when it's a value box, such as the Combat Patrol box we'll talk more about later, it'll be very much worth your money because buying it separately will be a lot more expensive. So you never quite feel bad about buying a Custodes value box because whatever you get in that box, you're probably getting way cheaper than if you were to buy it separately. Now, I did say that Custodes are a good army to start collecting if you're new to the game because they are cheap, but how are they for learning the game? I wouldn't actually recommend Custodes as your very first army of learning 40k unless you are willing to learn the hard way. Because you are so super elite and have so few models compared to other players, when you make a mistake, and you will when you're new to 40k, this is just part of the game, it's going to feel so much worse and have such a bigger impact on the state of the game. That being said, they are also very forgiving because if you make a mistake, well, you kind of have a get out of jail free card in that basically every model in your army will be able to ignore any damage on a 4+. This is not totally correct, but it's mostly correct. So it's a give and take. I wouldn't recommend it for someone who's like, no idea what Warhammer is, never played a miniature war game before, but at the same time, I wouldn't say don't start with Custodes because it's cheap, and in a way you learn the best because every mistake you make is bigger. It's a bit hard to explain, but I hope you get what I'm saying. In general, I think they are fine to start with Custodes as your first army. Just be ready for a potential steep learning curve. Well, even steeper than normal 40k because you are a super elite army, so losing one unit is losing like 1/10 of your army's points and maybe not just 1/20th of your army's points. If that didn't scare you away, well, then let's continue on to the next slide. So, let's first of all not think about competitive army building for now. This is simply you getting started with Warhammer. What should you be buying? Well, the good news is that you don't have a lot of choices. Custodes is one of the thinnest army ranges in 40k. There's not a lot of models in plastic. You have your named character in Valyrian, Alea, and Trajan Valoris. Then you have the Blade Champion, and that's it for named characters. Everything else is a character you build out of a box from a normal unit. So a Shield Captain can be built from either a Custodian Warden's box or a Custodian Guard box. A Shield Captain in Alaris Terminator armor is built from the Alaris Terminator box. A Shield Captain from the Virtus Praetors are built from, you guessed it, the Virtus Praetor box. So no matter what you like the look of, you can buy that box and you probably didn't do a big mistake. As in having to worry whether or not you can build something that you need. Now the obvious first recommendation to go out and buy is the Combat Patrol box. It's an insane, and I say insane in terms of Warhammer 40k savings, 36% discount compared to buying all of those kits individually. However, if you are lucky enough to notice that your local game store, or maybe a website you know, have the box known as Watchers of the Gate available, I would buy that right now. That box alone probably gives you 1500 points. I actually haven't done the math, but it gives you a lot of models for very cheap compared to buying them individually. Alternatively, the Boarding Patrol box from 9th edition, which is also not something that's being printed anymore, is also pretty good value. However, if none of those are available, Combat Patrol box is a great start. Now, there is a thing I need to talk about when it comes to Custodes, and that is a big part of the model range is locked behind something called Forge World. Forge World is a sister company to Games Workshop, which means that the models are totally legal, you can play them in the game, they're good to go. However, they are made in a material called resin rather than plastic, and for unknown reasons, they're also hella more expensive. Well, it's not unknown reasons, but to me, knowing, how plastic is compared to resin, it's weird they're that expensive. For now, I would just completely close your eyes, imagine Forge World does not exist. Once you have some plastic units up and going, then you can start considering Forge World. And even when you are ready to consider Forge World, I would consider not considering Forge World. Instead, I would look to my local gaming group, or a Facebook group, or anywhere else where you can hopefully find someone with a 3D printer who is willing to help you out. Alternatively, look to the east. Some of you will know what that means, some of you will not. I will not say it here on video in case I ever have a partnership with Games Workshop, but hopefully you know what I'm saying. Alright, so let's talk purchases. Well, as I said, there is no reason at all to not go ahead and get yourself a Combat Patrol box to get started. From this Combat Patrol box, you're gonna get a box of Custodian Guards, a box of Virtus Praetors, and 2 boxes of Sisters of Silence. How you build this box is obviously up to you. Here is my recommendations based on the current state of the game. For your 5 Custodian Guards, I would take one of them and build as a shield captain. Specifically with a spear, because sword and shields aren't amazing right now, but if you really like the look of swords and shields, just go ahead and build that. The rule of cool is something that you'll hear a lot when people recommend starting armies, and that's because that matters more. If you have more motivation to play and paint with your models when they have certain weapons and war gear, then that is more important than what is actually the best choice. The shield captain in the Custodian Guard box is actually not very different from a normal Custodian Guard. There's a single piece on the sprue that will let you put a cape on him, and that's the only difference. As an example, I have my guy right here. As you can see, this is a Custodian Guard, but I put the cape on him, and now he is used as a captain. And the best part about this, that let's say that you need this guy to not be a captain, you just need him to be a regular Custodian Guard, no one will notice. However, when you use him as a Custodian Guard, when you use him as a captain, it'll be very easy to know that this guy is the captain because he has a cape. And when you don't need to use him as a captain, he's just a Custodian Guard. That's simple. For the 4 other models you can build from the Custodian Guards in the Combat Patrol box, I recommend building 4 of them with spears. Next up, we have the Sisters of Silence. You'll get a total of 10 of them, and you'll have options to build them with all kinds of war gear. There are Sisters of Silence with bolt guns, known as prosecutors. There's some with flamers, known as witch seekers, and there's some with swords, known as vigilators. Once again, the rule of cool is what matters here. However, I recommend you build one of them as a Knight Centura. That is the character or leader type of this unit. And I recommend you build her with a sword. Once again, this is based on current information about the metagame. This might change in 4, 5, 6 months and when things are different. For now though, I don't see a reason to not build a Knight Centura with a sword rather than any of the other weapon options. So that is one of your Sisters of Silence as a Knight Centura. Next up, I'd recommend you build 4 of them as prosecutors. These are the bolder version. They are going to be very nice to have later down the road when you start playing more competitively or just want to list build a bit more. They're very good for holding your backline objectives and such. Then I would also recommend you build 5 Witch Seekers. These could totally be 5 Vigilators instead if you really like the look of Vigilators. In general, again, based on how the game is right now, Witch Seekers are more useful than prosecutors. Witch Seekers are more useful than Vigilators. And then finally, I would build 3 Virtus Praetors with probably salvo launchers. Unfortunately, Virtus Praetors, those are the bike guys if you weren't aware, are not amazing right now, so build them with whatever you want. I would just probably recommend salvo launchers, as Custodes generally lack some kind of anti-elite, anti-tank shooting rather than bolters. So I've given you a bit of recommendation on how to build things, but why do I recommend it that you build them this way? First of all, by building 1 Shield Captain and 1 Knight Centura, you now have a character for each of your different type of units. And that just allows you to try out a few more things. One game you might want to have the Knight Centura with the Sisters, another game you don't. Same for the Custodian Guard. Now, the Sisters of Silence in-game aren't super amazing. They're not like the biggest part of Custodes. They're kind of like an auxiliary force, like a bonus or something that you fill out your list with when you have points left over. But building them this way will give you multiple different units to try out and figure out what you like. For example, if you just really find out that you really like Witch Seekers, well, go ahead and get some more Witch Seekers, you know? Or if you don't like Witch Seekers, well, now you know that you should probably build some more Prosecutors or Vigilators, etc. In general, this is just to give you some variance so you can try out some different things, and if you feel bad later down the road that you've built this instead of that, you can always try and sell them and try and trade for another kit of Sisters of Silence. Or, you know, just keep them, and then all of a sudden they will be good. That is how Warhammer works. Something that is trash today could be the best pick you can take in 6 months. You never know. Now, when it comes to building the Virtus Praetor Captain, because you can build a Virtus Praetor Captain, there is actually no difference. Some people use an unhelmeted version to signal that this guy is the captain. Other people paint it differently. I'm among those other people. I just painted my Virtus Praetor Captain slightly different than the rest, and now when I need to use him as a captain, I know he's the captain. When I don't need to use him as a captain, he's just a Virtus Praetor. It's that simple. So now you've gone ahead and you bought your Combat Patrol box. You might have followed this guide on how to build your things. What's next? Well, as I said before, you can't really go wrong in buying more infantry or more plastic because there's not a lot of options. Before you go out and buy more, however, I would recommend that you start playing. You could play with normal 40k rules, and if you do, I would probably just build my list like this. This is not an optimal list by any stretch of the imagination. This is simply, you know, a variation of the units that you've built from your Combat Patrol box that you can take into the game. Alternatively, if you don't want to play normal 40k and want to play more of a starter version of 40k, there's a game mode called Combat Patrol. I'm not going to talk too much about that one because I don't have any experience with it myself, but in short, what you do is that you take your Combat Patrol, in this case for the Adeptus Custodes, and then you play against someone else who got a different faction, let's say Space Wolves, and they buy their Combat Patrol box, and then you have rules specifically made for your Combat Patrol box and for your opponent's Combat Patrol box, as well as missions, secondaries, and more. I believe this is a pretty decent way of getting into 40k. The rules can be quite different from what they are in normal 40k, but the whole playing the game, moving around your units, rolling dice, that part is the same. But yeah, if you play a normal game of 40k, try out this list, let me know how it goes. Obviously, make it clear that you're not playing 2,000 points, which is the normal army size. And if you have any questions after you played a few games, then you're always welcome to join the Discord, or just write a comment below and I'll do my best to answer whenever you leave that comment. Alright, so what's next for you to purchase once you've played a little bit and you know if you want to invest more into the Adeptus Custodes or 40k in general? Well, for the casual player, honestly, go ahead and buy another box of the Combat Patrol set. You'll get more guards, more sisters, more bikes. Again, will this be the optimal competitive list? No, but it'll bulk up your forces while also giving you some variation. So if you build the spears first, now you can build some sword and shield guys and some Vixilla guys. Those are the ones with the flags. You'll have more Sisters of Silence, so if you find out that you really like the Witch Seekers, build some more Witch Seekers. If you like Prosecutors, build some more of those. If you want to have variants, try out some Vigilators. And for the Virtus Praetors, well, you have more Virtus Praetors. For a competitive player, things get a bit more complex here, and honestly, I don't want to give too much advice here. The meta is just changing because we have a data slate come not too long ago. I don't want to be the one to say go out and buy 15 Wardens, and then the meta turns out to actually not want Wardens at all. If you are a competitive player, I mean, buying a Combat Patrol box is probably still fine. By the time you have it built and painted, things could have changed. But if I want to give some general advice to you as a competitive player, buy the infantry boxes. So that's Custodian Guard, Custodian Wardens, and Alaris Terminators. Those are pretty safe choices for you to pick up if you're new to Custodes and want to build a somewhat competitive list. So I've made this slide where I'm like, okay, people are going to ask me, what should I build? Or rather, how should I build my stuff? And so here's a list where I'm like, if you have this built, you're probably good to go with Custodes. I am not telling you, for the love of God, do not buy all of this at once. This is entirely too many models to buy in one go. However, as you're building up your army, and you'll say you buy a box of Alaris Terminators, and you're like, how how should I build this box of Alaris Terminators? You can come back to this video, look at this list and be like, oh, look at that. He recommends I have 5 Alaris with spear. Alright, so let's build 3 of them with spear, or 2 of them with spear and 1 captain with spear. I should also mention that just for the Alaris, there's no difference between the Alaris Terminator captain and a normal Alaris, except for the Alaris captain has some fancy shoulder pads. And if you want to, give him an unhelmeted, face, head, whatever. Or you can just paint him slightly differently. That's all up to you. So yes, if you are buying more Custodes, or you already have some Custodes and wondering, what should I get next? Look at this list and be like, okay, I buy this because this looks cool. I now have X amount of this. Cross it out, move on. There is one thing I will tell you. Unless you find them for very cheap, like on Facebook or secondhand or I don't know, a random going out of store sale something, do not buy Sisters of Silence in their own box. I would almost wager that buying a Comet Patrol box and then selling the Custodian Guard and Virtus Praetor will see you spend less money on Sisters of Silence than buying them individually. Because for some god-awful reason, 5 Sisters of Silence, which is like 60 points max in the game in a 2,000 point list, is $60. It doesn't make sense. Just don't buy Sisters of Silence unless you can get them for cheap. Alright, that is all for this video. It was probably kinda short. Well, not really short, but short for what I normally do. But I hope it gave you some insight into how to get started with Custodes and hopefully gave you a bit of advice and help that you might need. If you're looking for a painting tutorial, I am not the guy for that. I love painting, however, I don't have the setup, the patience, or the skills needed to properly teach you on how to paint, but there are a ton of resources out there. So just scour YouTube and I'm sure you'll find a lot of good advice. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, feel free to like and subscribe and perhaps leave a comment below to tell me how I helped you, or rather how I can better help you next time if need be. Or if I was just amazing, just tell me I'm amazing. I need that. My ego is fragile. Alright, thank you so much for watching, and until I see you again, I hope you have a wonderful time.